Dan, how are you?
There we go. I'm doing great. How about you, Richard?
Good, Dan. It was nice to see you the other day.
Likewise, it was a great event.
Yeah.
Good meeting you
Yeah.
in person.
Yes, we exist.
Yeah.
Hi, Kalanda.
Yeah, hello, good afternoon.
How are you?
Good. Trying to get my camera together.
Hey, Savan.
Hello.
Howdy. Jeff, how are you?
Doing well, thank you. How are you doing?
Good, just fine.
Kalanda, I was really glad to see how successful your event was. We had a competing thing that evening, but
Oh, thank you. It gets bigger and bigger every year, so I can just hope that we'll hit over six figures at some point.
That's the whole idea.
Right. Great
How
community.
about we'll wait. It's a little after 12. We'll wait another 2 minutes and then we'll get started, okay? Just to make sure everybody can jump on here. Hi, Mona.
Hello.
hi, Mona.
Well, afternoon. Good afternoon.
Richard, I sent you a message that I do have to jump off at 12:45 because I have to speak at a luncheon at 1, cutting it close.
Thanks for the heads up. Yep. All right, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody. This is our Connecticut, we'll still call it Connecticut Promise Task Force meeting. Really glad to see you. I'm just going to ask you to go around quickly and just introduce yourself very quickly so that we'll have that for the record, okay? Again, I'm Richard Sugarman, co-chair. Kelvin?
Kelvin Roldan, co-chair. Good morning. Good morning for me actually, but good afternoon for you. I'm actually somewhere else.
Savan
Dan? Oh, go ahead, Savan.
Savan Hines, Hartford Promise president.
Kalanda?
Yolanda Mall, Waterbury Promise Executive Director.
And Dan?
Dan Junji, I'm the Senior Government Relations and Communications Specialist with Chesla.
Mona?
Mona Lucas, Assistant Vice President for Enrollment at UConn.
And Jeff?
Jeffrey Berry, Associate Research Analyst for the Office of Higher Education.
Okay, and Megan?
Megan Villanova, Higher Ed Clerk.
Great. I think that's all are we missing anybody? Anybody there that we're not seeing? Okay, we'll move on then. I just wanted to take a moment and just do a very quick review from the last meeting. I'm just going to hit the highlights of what we covered there. We did talk about financial modeling and definitions of need. We spent some time talking about scalability versus quality and quality of the efforts. We talked about the critical importance of student supports and wraparound services in addition to the financial scholarship or grants that we're talking about. We spent some time. I thought it was a really good conversation. Mona, I was glad that you were able to really be part of that in terms of college and state partnerships and how colleges, the perspective of colleges about this whole effort and just the general atmosphere for colleges these days. I think that's a really important part of our consideration here and the work going forward. We talked a bit about Promise program definition and naming, and one of the things that we did cover is that the Connecticut program is probably, and Kelvin, you're going to talk a lot more about this, but the Connecticut statewide program is probably not going to be what we have talked about and understand to be sort of an integrated college success model. of supports and services and wraparound services and follow through within college. It's probably going to be more of a straightforward scholarship / grant program. Patricia, hi. You want to introduce yourself quickly?
Patricia Melton, New Haven Promise.
Great to have you here. So as a result of that, it may be important to have a different name for the Connecticut-wide program, the Connecticut State Program. And maybe for the moment, we can think of it as Connecticut College Grant Program or Connecticut College Scholarship Program. But I think it is important to make the distinction between the integrated models that Waterbury, Hartford, and New Haven have. And what we're talking about here is more of a grant financial aid program that is statewide. So I thought that was a really important part of our conversation.
I have a question.
Please, Patricia.
So
Yes.
I think I missed something. So we're around that Connecticut Promise, not naming it a Connecticut Promise. Did I miss something?
Just so there is no confusion, so
Okay.
there is no confusion between the Promise programs as New Haven and Hartford and Waterbury really execute them, which are really more integrated programs with support services and so on, versus the Connecticut State Program, which will probably not include those support service elements, but will be more scholarship grant oriented. So as
Right.
to
So
avoid the confusion.
So my question is, the other work group, that's, I thought, what you all were focused on. I'm sorry, I'm just confused.
So if I can add, Richard, so I think what the conversation is there is an umbrella and it's leveraging the programs on the ground, but in how we're thinking of standing up a statewide program, it would not carry the same full scope of elements that a traditional Promise program carries. So we're trying to find a path to recognize that differentiation, because part of the work is to uplift the programs on the ground and connect them in an ecosystem with the statewide program, if that's helpful.
Very helpful. Okay. Ayana, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Ayana. I am a Hartford Promise alumni, and I'm here to give a recent graduate perspective.
Great. Thank you, Ayana. And then just in terms of trying to review the minutes from our last meeting, just we also spent good conversation and time talking about equity and simplicity and trying to anticipate administrative burdens versus administrative streamlining, I guess I'll say, and those kinds of considerations that very much need to be part of the thinking going forward. So I'll stop there. Those were the highlights that I have from the last meeting. Other things that you want to add or comments you have about any of those points, please. Okay. So let me turn it over to Kelvin. I think we want to talk about where we are in terms of thinking from the various work groups. And again, the one work group is looking at the Connecticut statewide ecosystem here, and the other group is looking at existing Promise programs and a mechanism or structure for expanding Promise programs into other towns and communities. So Kelvin, why don't you go ahead and take as much time as you need.
Sure. Hello, everyone. It's great to see you. Thank you. The statewide program team met last week, and we had a pretty lively and engaged conversation around a number of elements that I'd like to be able to bring to you and to revisit a couple of things so that we can have some consensus around some of our eligibility criteria and continued eligibility criteria. But before I do that, I wanted just to share, Richard and I have been discussing, going back and forth with the Office for Fiscal Analysis of the legislature, who are trying to put together a financial model or an analysis to share with us in terms of what a program, statewide program, might look like and what the costs associated with that might be. For informational purposes, Richard and I have been talking a little bit about the Washington program and how the Washington program is structured and constructed. Some of the guidance that we have received and research we've done, is still aligned in the suggestion that we're looking at a last dollars program, but a major part of the conversation we had in Mona was very, very informative in terms of how this is done at UConn. What does that mean relative to student loans, or how is that constructed? And what does it mean for the overall financial ecosystem of how a financial package is put together for a student? I'm looking forward. The analysis is still being conducted, and there's still quite a bit of work to be done. But OFA is going to have something for us to consider very soon. Before I go on, give an opportunity to the team members to share anything that I may have missed, or questions that that you may have. Patricia, Mona, Kalanda, Dan. Good. Okay, well then let's go. So I'm gonna bring up the PowerPoint that we've been working against the team. And just a reminder, and if you have feedback, comments on anything that I'm going to share this morning, I welcome it. So that we can start creating some consensus. From our last conversation and the conversations that we've had, and these are the draft overall goals for the statewide program that we have constructed. Again, any direction, feedback that you have related to these, we really would welcome. And I'm going to go through all of them, and then give you the opportunity to then come back and share your thoughts. In addition to that, we spent quite a little bit of time discussing what an eligibility requirements might be. We talked about being a Connecticut resident, and there is one distinction that I'm going to call out right away here, is that as opposed to having a minimum GPA requirement, what the team is recommending is that we really just go in the direction of a student having a letter of acceptance from a BA granting institution. A couple of reasons for that. Number one, the institution is making a decision about this student being college ready, and there are standards associated with how that organization is making that determination. Number two, some of the programs on the ground, like Hartford, New Haven, Waterbury, have GPA requirements already. And so in a effort to avoid a numbers game with GPA requirements all across, to simplify the process. And then, once you get into GPA conversations, obviously there's also the question of calibration about what that means across communities and what it means even within communities. It becomes a bigger conversation. But with the letter approach of acceptance, we believe that that is a pretty strong standard in itself. And secondarily, for eligibility maintenance, we suggest that, as opposed to also a GPA requirement, that we really lean on this satisfactory academic progress standard, so that the student maintains ASAP throughout the enrollment that they are in the college enrollment period in which they are completing their degree. However, in addition to that, I should say, not but, and we also talked a little bit about how the student enters in the first place, and we felt pretty strongly that there should still be an attendance requirement, right, of 90% or higher. And we welcome conversation regarding that as well, and as well as Pell eligibility and FAFSA completion in the process. Lastly, we talked a little bit about how does a student continue to maintain eligibility, which would be maintaining enroll on a full-time basis and be good academic standing of 12 plus credits per semester. Obviously, life happens and situations do occur. And so we want to make sure that there is the ability for, on a case-by-case basis, for students that may drop a little bit below that full-time requirement. How do we address those circumstances? and at the same time be able to complete a degree within 6 years to maintain eligibility, but with really a strong focus around getting students to complete their degrees within a 4 year period. And lastly, this one around being used within a year of high school graduation. That's a lot of information, and I'm hoping that we can uh, hear from you, the rest of you, and my colleagues and team members on the statewide team in terms of anything that you have questions about, you want to add feedback on, or you really want to discuss because you have a different perspective that may have been shared just a second ago. I'll pause there and open the room.
So, do we have to specify nonprofit institution, and do we want to? Because that is one thing that is, at least for us, has been a pretty strong criteria. And then it's a lot of students, right? If you say who's gotten an acceptance, regardless of their GPA, which is fine, if obviously the funding stream is available for that. The and we know that there's a lot of different universities in Connecticut, a lot of different programs, a lot of different standards, a lot of different, and that's a lot. But so, but I think if the funding is there, I guess my other question would be how we measure success in that. And so if the goal is to increase the number of students who end up with four-year college degrees, right? Then what does funding or funding alone do for it? What's the follow-up? I mean, those are the questions that are obvious ones, right? That come to top of mind.
Thank you, Sivan. So your first one, hopefully I tracked them all. Your first one being around nonprofit and public institutions, right? Like I think that's definitely a very good standard. Any feedback on that particular question from the team?
I would fully support it being limited to not-for-profit accredited institutions.
Yeah. Great.
Public and private.
Yes, public and private, yeah. Then the question around the fiscal question, right? So it's hard to know without data. That's the first thing. And that's part of the work that OFA is helping us do, which is looking at income eligibility and pushing the envelope as far as possible, with certain thresholds, and then going back and saying, okay, this is the potential universe that we are talking about. Until we know that, it's hard for us to really get our hands around, what the total cost and total eligibility pool is going to be in the first place. But I will say that, the OFA staff is working hard on that element of it and are putting together some good data and considerations for us. I think part of the charge that we have from the chairs is to think big and then go back from that. So maybe we're thinking a little too big, but at least we'll know we're thinking a little too big, and we have to redefine and think a little more less, so not so much broad, but rather a little more succinct in our approach. And so that we can actually get to a number that potentially reasonable, number one. Number two, how do you measure success in that process as well, which is, part of how we're thinking about accountability as well for how this might work.
Kelvin, let me just jump in here for a second just to provide maybe a bit of a range here. And again, the goal and the charge here is to think big, and all of you all are doing that, and we want to do that. But just for a range or perspective here, so the Roberta Willis pool, I want to say, is just over 40 million. Maybe it's up to like 43 million. I'm not exactly sure, but just over 40 million. The value of the Washington State College Grant Program is $500 million. So there's our range. Okay. We're probably going to fall somewhere within those two bookends.
Kelvin or the group, are there, like Washington State, is there no GPA, or was there a consideration of like 2.5? So there's no GPA.
And it's a first dollar scholarship.
Okay.
Yeah, we the team spent, and I'll ask, if my colleagues want to chime in on the GPA question, because we spent quite a bit of time playing or discussing different options of GPA. And we felt that number one, from a collecting of that information in the first place, that would be a standing up a particular set of challenges. But if the institutions are making a determination from an acceptance perspective, and making a value decision around the readiness of that particular student entering the institution, we felt that was a pretty strong standard in itself. I see Patricia and Mona with their microphones off. So if you want to add to that, please, I welcome it.
Yeah, Mona, you want to go first? No? Okay, I will. I just want to clarify that we're talking about four-year institutions, not open enrollment community colleges, where, you just would go. I mean, you would get accepted as long as you wanted to go. So the four-year institutions absolutely do the screen around admission, and I assume that everyone that they admit, they hope, will graduate. In other words, they're coming to the table with what is minimally required to be successful in that institution, plus whatever supports that institution, because all of them provide actually quite extensive supports. So we do have an application process, and let me tell you, administratively, that's a lot of work. Assessing, even though we just do the GPA and the attendance and what have you, it's an administrative. It will definitely add to the cost to have something where it's the state determining, who's college ready when the colleges already do it. I think that was what we were thinking, Kalanda and Dan and Mona.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, it was like a duplication of excellent work that the colleges do, and they have so much more history and expertise in that area.
I have a question about just because you mentioned Roberta Willis as an example, Richard. Should we be concerned that if this all goes through, there will be a funding impact to the Roberta Willis program, where we see a reduction in Roberta Willis dollars, but we get funding for this initiative?
I don't think so. I think we're looking at it as the financial aid infrastructure works as an ecosystem already, right? So we're not thinking that this would be supplanting, replacing, any existing programs, but rather how do we, broaden the pool so that more students are entering and making decisions about where they're going to college in the state of Connecticut, and hopefully stem off the out-migration that we're seeing as well. But no, I don't think we're thinking of it of a supplanting or disseminating the current infrastructure.
And the other question that I have, and I know we've said that we're talking about nonprofit, public, and private, but there are statewide programs that just fund public. So my question is, those are two different things. What are we thinking here? I'm not saying one way or the other. I'm just saying it expands the cost. And when it comes to a statewide promise.
Yeah, and I think families and students make decisions about where they want to attend, right? And so, we are thinking, at least my thinking is relative to that, is like, I don't know what the numbers look like. I'd like to be able to understand the numbers and understand the full data of the ecosystem, but certainly very supportive of families making decisions about where they want to go and us being able to support that decision, whether if in a public or a private institution. Richard, did you want to add to that as well?
No, I had another thought, but go ahead, Kelvin, please.
And I would imagine the size of our state makes it possible maybe to look at both, because we are a smaller state as opposed to, let's say, like a Texas or Florida.
Yeah.
Correct. And we are seeing, as a state, we are an exporter of talent at this point. We're seeing a lot of kids who are making decisions about going elsewhere. And we're ranked at the top of related to that particular data point. So one of the questions I would have is, how do we better incentivize students to want to stay in the state of Connecticut for their post-secondary experience? And that means, not just public, but also private institutions as a whole.
Yeah. And I was just going to emphasize Kelvin's point about creating an ecosystem here, really, that includes various elements and or layers that all lead to having more students choosing to stay in Connecticut, to go to college in Connecticut, to be successful in college, Sivan, to your point. I mean, I think that's clearly the goal, is to not only expand the number of people going to college in Connecticut, but the number of people being successful at that college. Just want to emphasize this idea of thinking of this as creating an ecosystem. Kelvin, it's the perfect description as far as I'm concerned.
The other, you quoted, or rather you mentioned a statistic as we're at sort of the top of that out migration. I would ask us to dig a little bit deeper to look at who are the out migrators. It could be those families that have more money to send folks out of state. So if we could at least take a look at those demographics, because I think of, let's say, a state like Mississippi, which has very low income threshold in relation to ours, and just, again, wanting to compare apples to apples. Why do our students out-migrate, and who are out-migrating?
No, that's good feedback, Patricia. We can certainly look a little bit underneath that particular data. And one of the things that I know, I spoke to university leader recently, and one of the things that they said is, some kids, Connecticut is Connecticut, and sometimes they just want to go somewhere else, even just for that period of time before they perhaps come home at a later time. So going to school, if you're living in a part of the state and just going up the street may not be necessarily what they want to do. So families are making those choices as well. But yeah, your point is well taken, Patricia, for sure.
Hey, Mona, can I ask you a question here just for a second, just to give a college perspective on this? So we're talking about support services. We know the critical role they play in the promise programs that exist. We're saying that this is going to be more of a financial scholarship program. And to Patricia's point, that the colleges have support services, transitions for services, first-year experience programs, and so on for students. How do you feel about that? And are there things that could be considered here to strengthen those support services that exist at UConn?
Let me think about this. So to strengthen those programs by providing what? Funding?
Not sure. Anything. What would be meaningful to you in terms of those programs being more available, more successful, and helping more students make the successful transition and journey to college?
I would definitely think my colleagues would say, to put them in a position to hire additional individuals to do the work. Because right now, I mean, they can do the work for the students who either are identified for their programs, like with first year programs or our learning center, tutoring center, but if we were to say, we would like all Connecticut, whatever we call this, Promise Grant recipients to also take advantage of X, Y, and Z. It will tax the current structure, but this might be a good problem to have if there's potential for, even if it's temporary staff, to supplement the current staff such that we could provide the level of service the students would deserve. Because if we write it in somehow as a requirement, and give them a host of services that, in order, to keep this grant, you must attend XYZ or register with this service, that service, pick two. And then that would at least connect them before they even arrive to the services that are available.
Yeah.
So
that's the kind of thing I was asking. I think it's worth sort of wrestling with this a bit. I'm aware that there's really two issues here. One, many students either don't take advantage of the services or don't know about the services, or there's that need to make that connection just in terms of, I'll just say, the marketing of what's available and the continuous marketing of that to students. But the second thing is what you're touching on. I'm aware of the University of Texas program, which for a while, they required all first generation students to be part of the TIP program, which was really a connector and a source of asset reinforcement for those students, strength reinforcement for those students. So this idea of and you do that with the Bridge program with certain students, right? They're admitted with the condition that they participate in the Summer Bridge program. So there is a precedent for this.
So just one point though, to Patricia's point earlier about administrative burden. If you're trying to prove that every student who has enrolled in a program, that is going to be an administrative nightmare of trying to figure out, then yes, you did, you didn't, you've now lost your funding. Did you that's going to be very complicated to do and require, again, more people to do it. I also don't think if this was supposed to be no income requirement, correct? It's universal for everyone. And so I think it's really hard to then put in if you meet this criteria, you must enroll in this program, right? If you're first gen, if you're this or that.
No, it was really with the idea that if you receive this grant, you then are part of this support system. And again, we're just playing with the idea, but it wasn't only certain people that would do that, Savon. It would be people who received this grant, but to be played with, to be considered.
The thing that I would say, when that question that you asked Mona and Mona's response, our philosophy is we do not duplicate. So we don't duplicate because you all have the students, right, on your campus, and we're not going to have an outpost there. But what we bring as Promise programs is it's very critical in terms of keeping that student connected to their community where they are being developed to take their role as leaders and citizens. And that means for jobs. And even though I'm not saying, I'm sure UConn and all the higher eds have career services, but those, I would say what we do for our Promise Scholars is just we're here in our community developing relationships with our employers in our city And so that's where certainly, I don't know, I know Hartford does it and Waterbury is doing it, but that's what we've been doing all along. So we are very clear about that role definition, responsibility, and we really take a back seat to what the college does to just amplify it. And the other thing that I would say is you have the CAPS program at UConn, but the CAPS is not for everyone. The CAPS is for those students who over time you have studied that would possibly struggle. So it's not even the full pool of your admissions process and matriculants. It's just what, 10%, 1%, 2%. So I would imagine you would have the same with those who qualify for Connecticut Promise. It would be a subset, and trying to figure out what that is. I mean, you could figure that out because there's lots of data to do that. We do that with our students. It's not everyone, but we have an algorithm that we identify students who are likely to struggle from data of students who have gone, we've had 3,000 students. So we're pretty accurate with who those students are going to be. And it's a subset, like 10% or 15% or something like that.
One thing that I think would, sorry.
I'm done.
Back to Richard's idea, I don't think it would be a heavy lift to provide the information to the recipients of the whatever Promise grant, because some students we throw a lot of information at them as institutions, right? And we just think, oh, yep, we've already told them about the Learning Center and the this and the that, they're good. And it's too much. But we could start perhaps introducing to them, here are a host of services and programs for your consideration. Because since if we have the money and it's going to be the program is going to be offered to more rather than fewer, we won't know the academic quality of the student until after, so we don't want to offend high achieving students by only sending them information about tutoring or, something that they wouldn't feel like they needed. But if we could develop something like some series of catch-alls, whether some could be written information that we send them, others could be webinars that we offer to explain the different services and how you obtain those services if you need it. That doesn't sound like a heavy lift with current resources. But to be in a position to say, if you're interested, you are welcome into our CAPS program or our this or our that, that's where it's I don't know that would work. Or be necessary, because some people won't need that level of service. Yeah. Some may only be interested in career services and learning that you need to start thinking about these things soon after you arrive, not when it's your senior year. Yep. And, so anyway.
Yeah, thank you for that. Kalanda, were you trying to?
Wouldn't there be overlap though? Because the institution will see what their current GPA is in their application. So let's say they are CAPS, those students will fall into the CAPS program or the Bridge program. And then the students who are maybe have a higher GPA may only need the webinars or the reminders to visit certain offices. And then you have the higher achieving students who may already be doing those things. Wouldn't there be overlap, and the institutions would already know those GPAs coming in, and then could determine what resources they can offer based on what the determined acceptance and GPA is?
I think it's both GPA and standardized test scores. Those test scores haven't gone away.
Yeah.
They're significant still.
Some are tests optional too. I mean, they would have to look at the whole picture, yeah.
I'm thinking from a holistic perspective, it's more than just the GPA and the standardized test score. It's really more of, if there was a score in our admissions holistic application review, if students were assigned a score, it would really be that score that would help inform us as to who might need a little extra help and who wouldn't. So that's a little more of a elaborate process, but not, well, just speaking for UConn, not something that we couldn't do. Because like if and I'm just making this up, but if my score is a 1, I might just get an invitation to, I don't know, hey, you want to learn about different services at UConn? Here, this is the webinar. If my score is a 8, I might get an invitation to participate more frequently and detailed information about the tutoring center, the writing center, the host of other things that are available. So
Right. Yeah. We
Appreciate
developed something like that we have a score and there's probably like 12 different things, data points that go in there. And we've been able to map it to the performance of, like I said, 3,000 students, and you probably have thousands and thousands of students. So those data points go in there and you just throw it in. Every student coming in gets a score. And it's
Let me
pretty
just-
clear.
I just want to say thank you for this. I just wanted to spark this thinking a bit, and you all have definitely run with it. But I think it's worth this kind of thinking in terms of how there might be a vehicle or vehicles to see some support services for this group, although it's not the central piece of its. The central piece is still the financial piece, but not to totally ignore the potential for services being provided at the college level.
Just
Kelvin, I'll
one
turn it.
little point, just because someone in my office who does data just texted me. He said that, and he developed this algorithm, 40% of our kids, graduate within 4 years. I mean, most of them graduate within whatever, and they don't need any support. We don't do anything with that group. And then 30% needs just one touch. So that brings you up to 70%. So I would imagine again with the pool, it would sort of come down like a funnel to who needs support, who needs no support, who needs just a little touch, who needs more broad touch to get to what a program would look like or what the colleges would need as well.
That's helpful, Patricia. Kelvin, I'll turn it back over to you. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna just put this up once again so that folks have an opportunity to look at it. And if to see if it sparks up any other comments and feedback that you'd like to provide. Again, this is what we're thinking in terms of general eligibility requirements. This is what the very broad view of it is. And then maintaining eligibility, continuing eligibility. We went back and forth quite a bit. I remember it around this discussion of part-time versus full-time and the definition of what full-time might be. And we set a standard consistent with what the federal definition is. And then, just wonder from your perspective before I hand it over back to Richard, if there's any additional feedback that you'd like to provide or additional direction that you'd like to give the statewide group to give more consideration to any particular element.
May I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
So BS degrees don't qualify?
BS degree would qualify, yes. BA granting, so BA granting.
Okay, because it just says BA. So I wasn't sure.
We can add the differentiator for sure.
I just want to build on Mona's thing and say that in my professional work at 20 years in higher ed, working in the area of student services primarily, and my current work, we currently support through the Office of Higher Ed programs that augment the CAPS program through a cohort model. And I can tell you that it's highly successful, and I spend our grantees in UConn in the CAPS program spend about 85 to 90% of the money that we send on human capital to support the students within the cohort, not to duplicate any services, but build upon those services and directly deal with the individuals that were in the cohort for the specific need that's being directed. And because we're not duplicating or anything like that, and our money is interjected and added directly to human capital, it works. And I'll agree with Patricia and others that it can be a logistical nightmare, but I will say that specifically at UConn and CAPS, they use a swipe system. They know who's coming in to do what, when they're doing it, and all the metrics behind every single student. I've never had a problem getting data or finding any information whatsoever.
Thank you. That's helpful.
There's one addition I would recommend to just the side note about we would require them to file the FAFSA or institutional aid applications, because some students will need to file that versus the FAFSA. But I would, in parentheses, you have to take advantage of Pell Grant, but I would maybe add to that Pell Grant and institutional aid, because without that aid application, other than merit money, students wouldn't be considered for the institutional need-based money. So
Absolutely.
that's just a minor, like you've given us access to the document. So one of these days when I get to it, I'll add it, but I just thought I'd mention those two.
And clarifying, this is for citizens or residents of Connecticut?
So that question, Connecticut has a law associated with this and a standard in terms of how it manages that particular question. So we would adhere to Connecticut law as
Says
it
what?
questions.
Which says what? Connecticut resident?
That students without legal immigration status can be considered for institutional aid.
So then my question is whether or not that would be ACTUS, because isn't that the form that was designed for those students? So it would be FAFSA, ACTUS, and institutional.
Well, yeah, we call our institutional aid that ACTUS is the institutional aid application.
Okay.
Yeah,
That was the question, ACTUS.
no, we would adhere to the standard of law that
Okay.
Connecticut has already established.
Great.
Calvin, did you have other things that you wanted to cover here?
No, I think I'm good. If folks want to share, I've made the document available. So if folks want to share feedback, email me, call me, whatever means of providing feedback might work best for you, please feel free to do so. Thank you.
Just a quick, so ideally, Kelvin, almost hate to ask this, but I will. How soon would feedback be helpful? Or is there a deadline?
Well, I appreciate that question. Thank you, Mona. This is an iterative process. And you can imagine that we're going to be working on this up until the very last minute. But, the sooner the better, because the more information you give me and Richard now and the team, it influences the direction of what happens next. So if you can provide me feedback within the next week for where we currently are, it helps us set up the conversation for the next iteration of the product that we need to produce and the conversations that we need to have.
Okay, thanks.
And Mona, let me just remind the group. So we have another meeting scheduled for December 3rd. We have an optional meeting scheduled for December 10th. The report, our recommendations and report are due to the legislature by the first week in January. We hope to have, certainly a good draft report that we're able to share with the co-chairs of the higher ed committee, by the middle of December. So, as Kelvin said, this is the time when we need all your comments, feedback, suggestions, and so on. Yeah, this is the time. I did want to ask Ayanna, from a recent graduate's perspective, anything that you've heard here today or that you've been part of other conversations that you want to add or focus on? Your perspective is really important to include in the mix here.
I guess one of the things that I was putting some thought into was when we were talking about the different resources for students that receive the scholarship. And I just was thinking back to the fact that, as incoming freshmen, you are sent a lot of different resources, and, you have your RAs who are like, you need to come to this meeting because we have to talk about this. And it's like so many people don't show up to those things. So many people don't utilize the resources that are being offered. But for the people that do want to utilize it, I think it could be helpful to have it. What Mona was saying, having like a virtual option, something that's sent through email where you're able to, search your email. Wow, I remember like the scholarship I got sent me this email that mentioned this. Now I need this, a month later. I feel like that could be helpful to have a record of that for students who do want to utilize it. And the other thing I was thinking was when Patricia was talking about like the different metrics used to, estimate if someone's going to struggle or if someone's not going to struggle, the thing that I thought about was what about the students who you predict aren't going to struggle but do struggle? I just wanted to make sure that there still is those resources for those students and that they still are made aware of the options to them. Because, me, even as a high achieving student in high school, there still was moments in college where I was struggling. And college is a huge transition. So regardless of what the predictors might, predict, there's always that gray area. So that's my thoughts.
It's very helpful, Ayana. Very, very helpful to get that perspective. And I think part of what you're saying is there's a blizzard of stuff that comes at students. They may not be ready to even figure out what they need, when they need, if they need. But you're also saying that this journey through college changes over time. You may feel well prepared at certain moments and have real need for support and service at other moments. It's not a static thing. It's very dynamic, is what I hear you saying.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you, Ayana. I just wanted to. I'll shift to the other work group, and we have not had another meeting since this task force met. So I'm just going to remind folks that equally important in this ecosystem, that we're trying to crystallize and develop here, are the existing 3 Promise programs, New Haven, Hartford, and Waterbury, that currently exist. And making a critical part of this report and recommendations is the support, additional and/or not additional, but state support for those existing Promise programs. I just want to spell out a couple of things. I've talked to Patricia and Kalanda and Sivan about each of their individual programs and how they see the future and what some of the needs that they see that they're not able to meet today that would be important in terms of additional state support. So, but the real linchpin here is that each of those programs, even though they do things in some ways slightly differently, in some ways maybe more differently, they are all what I would again call integrated college success models that provide financial support and provide all sorts of other supports and services and connection for the scholars so that they can have a high level of success. And scholars within each of those programs are having a high level of success. So I think the linchpin here is building on the success that these programs have had over a long period of time and making sure that they can continue to be successful and expand their successful work. I think that, and as a result, have more students coming into those programs and more students being successful and graduating as Promise Scholars from those programs. So that to me is a compelling message. And the other piece of that message is that these programs are really serving as a talent pipeline for employers into the workforce in Connecticut already, and that Connecticut wants and needs as much of that robust talent pipeline as it can possibly have. And these are the programs that can make that happen. So I do want to emphasize that, and that's going to be an element of our recommendations. And the second thing I'll say is creating this mechanism or this vehicle for helping communities that are not currently Promise programs consider becoming Promise programs. And again, just as a reminder, the mechanism that we have landed on for now, I don't have a great way of saying this, but is kind of a technical assistance advisory group that is available to towns and cities and communities when they are considering just the idea of having a promise program and helping them understand the models that exist, helping them understand the elements that would be required in those communities for them to even consider a promise program. And what are those elements that would be required? Partnerships that would be required, relationships with the school system, relationships in the individual schools, relationships with business partners, all the elements that would be required, that what the financial picture would look like and the funding requirements would be. All those things would be needed, and helping them assess whether in those communities they can rally all of those relationships, partnerships, and resources so that they can get to a point of either saying, well, we really can't consider this. It doesn't really work in our community, or we think we can rally those partnerships and resources, and we want to consider moving forward. And in that case, this technical assistance advisory group would help them move toward that next step of launching a promise program, and help them then move toward the next step following that of what will be required in terms of being able to sustain and be successful as a promise community. So that's the mechanism or structure or vehicle that we've considered. And I've tested it with a handful of folks in various roles in this sort of landscape. And I think most people feel that that is a sort of a thoughtful guidance approach to this, which would avoid, such communities that are not really in a position to be successful at this, but would lift up those communities that really are. And again, using the model that we already know is successful as at least a framework for that expansion into other communities. So I'll stop there. I just wanted to emphasize those couple of things from our work group.
That's great, Richard. The question or the thing I'd like to throw out there, since we're really focusing on more of a grant scholarship, is I think the thing that also distinguishes the 3 Promise programs, and eventually will include Bridgeport Promise, which is already up and running and is kind of an integrated model because it's already doing college access, is the employment part. So, is there any way that we can look at Department of Labor? There's a lot of money in this state that the state sets aside for talent workforce development, and our programs are major contributors to that. So, if there's some way, there's some language in there talking about workforce development, and certainly the work that we do with our Promise alums and college students is really a huge lift, and we're not sort of included and tapped into those funds at this point in time. And so I do put that out there publicly.
Yeah, it's important, and I think that will be certainly part of the recommendations and report for sure, Patricia. Yeah. The workforce talent development piece is very central to what these programs are about. Yeah. Any other comments, additions, thoughts on any of that? If not, let me just talk a little bit with you all and ask your thoughts about the future.
One other thing, sorry, is if the state in these recommendations, there could maybe be, the state could play a huge role in at least incentivizing, like a kind of an innovation grant, incentivizing communities to start programs, like as just a little seed money to explore and whatnot. So that would be great to see in there if there could be some funding for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely. And again, the state support would be creating this advisory technical assistance group that would be funded with state support, but certainly adding an incentive piece to that could be attractive. It's a good point, Patricia. In terms of the next meeting, we have that scheduled for December 3rd at 12 o'clock. We had originally said we would try to do that in person, but I'm going to ask for a vote here. And I suspect what the vote's going to be. Would you all rather meet in person or on Zoom? Who says in person? Raise your hand. I thought that would be the case. So let's make
I
that
can
as,
go in person, but if no one else wants to be in person.
so let's make that a Zoom meeting. Let's make that a Zoom meeting on December 3rd. And again, just as a reminder, we have an optional meeting a week later on December 10th. And again, that may be needed just in terms of sharing with you all the draft, the recommendation, the report, to make sure that everybody is good with that. But I think that our goal is to have a version of that to be able to share with at the December 3rd meeting. But again, as Kelvin said, as we talked about, any edits, suggestions, even if they're things that have been in these meetings and these conversations that you want to make sure are part of the work, like Jeff, you mentioned, BS and BA. Let's make sure that we're clear about those kinds of things. Please either share it via email or make notes on the documents that we've shared so that we'll have all of your input as we go forward. Okay. Kelvin, anything else before we wrap up, or anybody have anything else before we wrap up?
No, just saying thank you for your continued work, and please do, if you, again, I'll make it as easy as possible. If you want to email me, call me, say, hey, let's get together for 5 minutes via Zoom or in person, whatever it may be. We want to make sure that we incorporate your feedback and views into this.
Are the subcommittees meeting again before this December 3rd meeting?
I think what I'll do, Kalanda, at least in terms of the work group on the existing Promise programs and the expansion, is share with you that version of the report or recommendations so that you all have a chance to see it. And if we want to get together as a group following that, we can certainly do that.
And for our group, Kalanda, it's I think it's going to be hard with the holidays. Right, just walking right into them. So I will try to set up something, perhaps not for the 3rd, but for just after the 3rd, so that we can share some materials between now and us, and then have a more focused conversation.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else before we adjourn? I'll just say happy Thanksgiving to everybody. I hope you have joyful days, joyful week, joyful time off, and thanks for all your good thoughts and attention and work on this. You've been a really wonderful group. So happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Thanks, Richard.
everyone.
Thanks.
Happy
Bye, everybody.
holidays.
Happy holidays, everybody.